pick up on your comment by saying a few words about the Christians of the Middle East. There is a purported saying in Arabic that first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. And the Saturday people essentially left in the decade around the creation of Israel from 1945 to 1955. And now there are only the most vestigial Jewish communities left. There's still two that have 20,000 or so people in Morocco and Turkey. But elsewhere, it's 12 elderly women in Egypt, one, I think, Afghan, and just a few in Iraq, and so forth. The 1 million or so Jews of the Middle East outside of Israel are essentially gone. 96% of them are gone. The Christian population has been about 20 million, mostly in Egypt, but with substantial numbers elsewhere. And now they are leaving. In particular in Iraq, where I think well over half of the population, Christian population, is left. Syria it's happening, Turkey it's happening, and elsewhere. I think that the strain of Islamism that is now predominant is not exactly genocidal. The goal is not to murder Christians, but I would call it exclusivist, to push Christians out, or ethnic cleansing. There should be no Christians. And the most dramatic example of that was in Mosul, where where ISIS came and eliminated the Christian population in Mosul. I wear this little pin. It's a noon, an Arabic letter N. That is the symbol that the ISIS fighters put on the houses of the Christians, and for Nasrani, for Christians, saying, come and get this house. So I wear this in solidarity. I think it's a tragedy. I think it's building. There's going to be more of it. And I don't know if 96% of the Christians of the Middle East will be gone, but a substantial number. And we in the West are not paying a whole lot of attention to it. We're working with the Iranians. We're working with the Turks. We're not raising these issues in the way we should. So there is already existing tragedy that is only growing in size concerning the Christians of the Middle East.
Hi, I'm Bob. Thank you for coming. So about 8 years ago, Netanyahu said, Israel Netanyahu and Uzi Landau said, Iran is not our problem, it's the world's problem. The world hasn't reacted. Why aren't the Saudis, why aren't some of these other countries that have resources and we've given them an awful lot, aligning themselves with Israel, dogmatically saying, we are opposed to Iran having nuclear weapons. We will support whatever actions needed in order to mitigate this issue. And on the side of the second thing, Montgomery County, Maryland, yesterday ruled that the Christian holidays of Christmas and Easter are not to be celebrated in the Montgomery County schools to appease the Muslims. It seems like Europe is coming to America, and I just wanted to comment on that.
The Saudis are against the Iranian nuclear buildup, but the Saudis have an interesting way of expressing themselves. They do indirectly, sub rosa, but they certainly are. I would divide the Middle East today into three major blocks, or three blocks. One would be the Sunni status quo bloc, which Saudi Arabia leads. Egypt is a major part of. The various other states, Jordan, Morocco, and so forth, the Gulf states, and Israel is an adjunct to it. They are pretty much on the same way. They don't have real problems with each other. Historically they did, now they don't. They might in the future again, but now they don't. And then you have the Sunni revisionists, namely Turkey and Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood. Small bloc, but very dynamic. And then finally you have the Shiite revolutionaries in Iran. And these three are contending with each other. You can see them on the battlefields in Syria, not just there, in Libya, in Yemen, they're fighting each other. So Israel is more or less aligned, or the Saudis are more or less aligned with Israel. And so when the Israelis fight Hamas, which is part of a different bloc, you don't hear boo from the Saudis, Egyptians, and others. And indeed, the Egyptians are now putting more pressure on Hamas. So that's kind of working out, though one would wish the Saudis would be more forceful, but they're not, just not. And in part it has to do with their population, which would not be too happy about a formal agreement with Israel. Your second question is a much larger one, about Islam coming to the West. Let me start by saying that Muslims have the same rights and responsibilities as any other American or European citizens. They're not different in any fundamental way. And that laws apply to them and applies to everyone else. And laws are dynamic. The reason why we have parliaments and Congress is because circumstances change and you need to address new issues. So there's nothing wrong in that. The trouble comes from the fact that a number of Muslims, especially Islamists, want to change the way we do business here. They believe they have a superior civilization to our own, that they are bringing to us, giving us the benefit of, and we should adapt to them. And there are a number of symbolic representations of this sense of superiority. One of the clearest is what you alluded to, namely holidays and related topics, so that the Islamists want to bring their holidays and have them become our legal holidays, and they want to have Christmas, Easter, and other major holidays de-religionized, de-Christianized. But there are many, many other areas. And my favorite one is polygamy. Make a long story short, this civilization has developed over time into one that is monogamous. Muslim life is polygamous, or more accurately, polygyny. One man, potentially several wives. Without really anyone noticing, a number of countries, not the United States, but a number of countries have accepted polygamy. Not so far as to initiate polygamous marriages, but to recognize them if they're legally contracted elsewhere. In Toronto and in Ontario, if you have a legal polygamous marriage, say in Morocco or India, it's legal in Ontario. It's legal in Britain. It's legal in Italy, in the Netherlands, Australia, and elsewhere. So we are seeing a rapid, this 10 years ago didn't exist anyway, we're seeing a rapid transformation of one of the more basic pillars of our society without any discussion. And this is particularly pronounced, as you suggest, in Europe, much more so than here, where on a daily basis you see countries like Sweden and the United Kingdom, changes taking place. Halal food being prepared in state taxpayer-funded schools, prisons, hospitals, everywhere you look, changes being made, swimming pools, parliaments, law courts, to adjust to Islam. And on the one hand, one has this increasing Islamization, but also on the other hand, one has an increasing reaction against it. And in Europe, not here, but in Europe, every country, there is a political party that is anti-immigrant, anti-Islam, anti-Sharia, they take different forms. Some of them emphasize it very heavily, some it's on the margin. But everywhere these are growing. The most well-known and most advanced is in the Netherlands, the PVV under Fred Wilders, who actually has supported a government, been part of the establishment in that sense. Most countries that demonize, they're rejected, they're kind of cordon sanitaire around them, unwillingness to deal with them at all. including other parties. But they're growing and growing. I'm just back a couple of days ago from Sweden, which is perhaps the most extreme example, where the Sweden Democrats absolutely vilified. I had to hide the fact, this is on tape, but I'll admit it, I had to hide the fact that I met with Sweden Democrats, but I couldn't tell anyone in Sweden. They wouldn't talk to me. They went from 0 2 elections ago to 5% of prior election to 13% this past election, just a couple months ago. And everyone expects it to go up and up. So there are two dynamics. One is Islamization and one is counter-Islamization. And I believe that they are very powerful forces that are going to be extremely important in the future of Europe. And we'll see just about everywhere. I mean, there are a few places, Iceland, Finland, Portugal, that don't have it, and Eastern Europe doesn't have it. That leaves about 15, 20 countries where these are major social issues, and they're growing and growing and growing as this Islamist urge to impose Islam and Islamic ways is met with a counter populist demand that things not be changed. So you have, for example, in France, you have an organization that goes out and serves pork soup, specifically pork soup, to make a point that, you know, we do things our way. And I think these tensions are they didn't exist 25 years ago. 25 years ago was the Rushdie affair, which really began this whole issue, made it visible. 25 years ago, no one was thinking about it. Today, it is a significant force, significant issue with forces on both sides. And 25 years from now, I'm convinced it'll be far larger than it is now. So this is very, very major. And you asked about the United States. Well, it's here too, but it's in very different form. It's not nearly so important. But you know, just last week, the election had in Alabama a constitutional amendment for something called American law in American courts, which is generally worded, but is specifically about Sharia, about Islamic law, and that's the intent. And it passed 72 to 28. And 4 years ago, there was a similar amendment in Oklahoma that passed 70 to 30. So Americans are also aware of this. And it's not a voting issue in the way it is in Europe. There are no political parties. There are barely any politicians who focused on this. But in a slower, less dramatic way, it's growing here as well.
Yeah, my name is Jim Darwin, and I feel that we've had sort of a conceptual problem that's gone on for a long time, and it includes Bush and the whole period. There's either, you use the word Islamist, and the other word, of course, is terrorist. The problem with Islamists, of course, is it's all inclusive. It includes the whole billion people at once. The problem with terrorists is it's totally vague. It's a tactic. It has nothing specific about it. So it's hard for it to be the heart of a response, a full-scale strategic response. And Islamists, because it involves them all at once, has the detriment of we constantly are going to have to re-justify and be afraid that we're being Islamophobic, etc., and all the other critiques. So I felt that we need a third concept that nails what we want to do down and takes it one at a time. And my concept would be jihadist. I think we saw something happen in Egypt when Sisi and the ruling class of Egypt reacted to a year of the Brotherhood actually controlling the country, threw them out and in rather brutal fashion, and have put them down, and have aligned themselves with Israel since that time, essentially, as much as they can, given that the American government seems to align itself with, as we're saying, Iran. So the idea that might form a coalition around would be an anti-jihadist movement, which would attack ISIS, of course, as you say, it's not the same as Iran. But then Iran is very jihadist anyway. And so that would nail them also. So this is something I thought.
I agree with impulse to try and define who the enemy is. And I thoroughly agree it's not all Muslims, and it's certainly not restricted to terrorists. I would only disagree and say that Islamist is not a reference to a billion people. It's a reference to those, that's Muslims. It's a reference to those in the billion plus people who seek to apply Islamic law today. And I prefer Islamist to jihadist because jihadist implies that you're out there fighting in some fashion. Whereas many Islamists, in referring to my prior answer about law courts and schools and holidays and so forth, I'm not. They're not fighting in a literal sense. They are seeking to impose Islamic ways through political means. So to me, jihadi is too narrow. And so I agree with your impulse, but I would call the enemy is Islamism and Islamists. I estimate, and I have to say over the years I've become a little less confident about my estimate, but I estimate 10 to 15% of Muslims are Islamist. It's a very murky topic, how exactly to define an Islamist. The evidence shows less and more, but anyway, that's a figure that you can try on, that roughly 1/8 of Muslims are Islamists. And they are the enemy to Muslims, as you point out in Egypt, and Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere. They are the enemy. So I would offer that to Islamists, but jihadi would also be, except that it's small.
The only reason why I would try to press that point is that it is literally a formal declaration of war against all non-jihadis, essentially. And the simplest of justifications on our part would simply that it's unacceptable out of self-defense.
Well, but I'm replying that it doesn't have to be a formal declaration of war. Wanting to get holidays changed in Montgomery County in Maryland is not a declaration of war, but it counts as a
What kind of hope or optimism do you have about our State Department administration changing their viewpoint about how they're very pro-Arab and basically anti-Zionist and very anti-Israel? That's a major problem where they keep going towards diplomacy and there's absolutely nothing positive coming out of it. How will that ever stop?
Well, 2 points. The State Department did change. It's not quite as cool, cold, and effective as it used to be. And secondly, the really major decisions are not made in the State Department. The State Department, as I say as someone who worked there, handles issues which are secondary. And the great issues of the day, such as the Arab-Israeli conflict, are handled by the White House.
And diplomacy.
And the White House depends on who's elected. Yes, the State Department carries it out, but it's the political appointees, such as Kerry, who really make the policy on these big issues. When you get into the arcana of U.S. relations with I don't know, Ethiopia, then the State Department is running things. But when you have U.S.-Israel relations, or the Arab-Israeli conflict, or Palestinian-Israeli negotiations, that's not the State Department. The State Department really doesn't have much of a role. It is frustrated, wants more role, but doesn't have that much. So it's the White House. And then on the other side, you have Congress, which also is frustrating, which tends to be very friendly to Israel, but which also doesn't get to make the really important decisions. It can influence, as the State Department can, or to put it more broadly, the permanent bureaucracy can, and you have the politicians in the Congress, and both of them have some importance. But in the final analysis, it is the executive, it is the political, the president, the vice president, the political appointees, the cabinet members, and the others who make the crucial decisions, and particularly in the Arab-Israeli sphere. This is a favorite. Virtually every president, even those who don't want to get involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict. You can find quote after quote after quote, presidents and secretaries of state saying, I'm not going to get involved, I'm not going to fall into the same mistake that my predecessors made, I'm going to keep my distance from this, and they don't, because there's a compelling quality to it. And when they do that, they push the State Department aside. So State Department and Congress are secondary actors, White House,
So
Cabinet.
back to the administration and the White House, at some point are they going to admit that diplomacy is like totally not work? Because they just-
That is my hope, that at some point, a new president comes in and says, you know, we've been at this since 1993. Not only has it not worked, but arguably it's been counterproductive. Let's try something new. In which case, I, among others, will say, here you go, here's something new. How about our side wins? Here's a good victory. Really, really original ideas.
In December 1998, President Clinton addressed all of the leaders of what you have done. You have finally eliminated clauses in your charter calling for Israel's destruction. Do you think that they changed the charter one word?
Well, that's an easy one. No.
And why don't we state that unless and until they actually change the charter, in addition to completely eliminate the Fatah Constitution, which says the same thing, both of those charters and the Constitution were done before Israel got the West Bank. It was 1964. Why don't we play upon that issue?
We being who?
Well, we should be able to talk to our congressmen and explain to them that they double-crossed the late Prime Minister Rabin. Rabin never, and he made the statement, never would have signed an agreement if he knew that they were not going to change the charter.
Well, you're totally right, but on the other hand, with car jihad now taking place, this is a bit of an abstraction. There are more immediate problems. Of course, you're right, and in the long term, should there be a resolution of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, war, then yes, that has to go. But I would go further. I mean, why do we accept a terrorist organization in the first place as a legitimate actor? I mean, when we confronted the Soviet Union, did we demand of the Soviet Union that they change their constitution? And there were just so many other things to worry about. The constitution wasn't really the essential thing. You're absolutely right. It was bogus change. Clinton and others fell for it. But I wouldn't encourage you to make this the centerpiece of an argument because there's so much else going on. Mahmoud Abbas has, as I just earlier argued, become a rejectionist. Well, this is not someone that we should be asking the Israelis to have negotiations with. We should be asking the Israelis to get rid of him and everything he stands for and all the organizations around him. That's what we should do. And get rid of the PLO lock, stock, and barrel, not just the Constitution, but the whole thing. Why should we accept it? A couple more questions? Sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question. It seems that your position is that Israel ought to basically fight to the end and against the Palestinians and bomb Iran, and the negotiations are secondary. My question is, having two daughters who live in Israel, 9 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, several of whom are in the army, what would the costs of this war be to Israel?
You reduced my argument to saying Israel shouldn't make war on everyone. Well, I do think that getting rid of the Iranian nuclear program is a priority. And I can't exactly tell you what that will mean for your progeny in Israel, but I do believe that will make them safer. I do think Israel is safer within Iran, with the Islamic Republic, than it does with weapons. So that's simple and clear. On the Palestinian issue, I am not saying that the Israelis should bomb the West Bank and Gaza back to the Stone Age. I am I'm saying that the Israeli approach and our approach should be to win. That doesn't necessarily mean dropping bombs on people. It does mean having a goal that you cause your enemy, who you call an enemy and not a peace partner, you call him an enemy and you look to figure out how to cause him to despair. By the way, this is what the Palestinians are doing.
But
The
specifically,
point of their violence is to cause the Israelis to despair, to give up, to leave, to accept Palestinian domination. Well, specifically, it's an approach. And by the way, it's the approach the Israelis had until Oslo, until 1993. For 45 years, from 1948 to 1993, the Israeli approach was to win. I'm not making something up. This is not my Pipes plan. This is what the Israelis did for 45 years, and they did it with considerable success. It was what we did vis-a-vis the Soviet Union. We didn't bomb the Soviet Union, but we looked to win. We wanted the Soviet Union to lose, and they lost. Now, I couldn't have told you what steps exactly would cause it to collapse, but it was a mentality. I can't even now tell you. It was a mentality. We want to win. We want the Soviet Union going. Well, in the case of Israel and Palestinians, what I want is the roughly 20% of Palestinians who now accept Israel to grow to 30, 40, 50, and 60%, so that they become a significant political force. And that so the Palestinian leadership accepts Israel, lives next to Israel in harmony. And so when the Palestinians are upset with Israel, instead of setting off bombs and killing people with their cars, they write a stiff letter to the guy. They behave in civilized ways. And this, I think, can only be done by giving the Palestinians the sense that the current project of eliminating Israel is doomed. I don't really want to get into specifics because this is not the policy now. Once it is, then we can get into specifics. Let me give you one. I think the U.S. government should recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Not for the petty bureaucratic reason that is normally given, that this is the only capital in the world that we don't recognize. So what? Who cares? But because if the U.S. government recognized Jerusalem, presumably to be followed by other governments, this would send a signal to the Palestinians that Israel's there, and there for good, and its capital is recognized. That is something useful. That would be a step forward. But we don't do it, and we don't do it because we worry about the consequences of it. That's a legitimate worry. But we don't do it in part because we see it as kind of bureaucratic neatness. No. So we should be thinking through our policies as to what we can do to help Israel convey to the Palestinians that Israel is there, it's permanent, it's tough, it's backed by us, and they better get used to it. And they better accommodate it. And then, with luck, the Palestinians, who are skilled and talented, have a great sense of dignity, can build their own society, their own culture, their own polity, and their own economy. Which they're not doing now. They're completely focused. Completely is too strong. They're very much focused on hurting Israel. That's the mark of Palestinian success. What damage you can do to Israel.
and this can't be done in the context of negotiations?
No, can't be done in the context of negotiations. Negotiations are a failure. Negotiations are simply a way by which we put pressure on the Israelis to make some concession to the Palestinians, who then become more incited and outraged and more violent and more demanding. The Palestinians were far more quiescent before Camp David Oslo Accords of 1993. Far more quiescent. It has been the money, the arms, the recognition that has made them more rejectionist, more aggressive against Israel. It stands to reason. If I want to kill you and I get given arms and money, I will be more intent to kill you than if I'm deprived of them. The traditional way of making war is to deprive your enemy of resources. Think of the medieval siege of a city. Think of the way the British made it impossible to trade with Europe under Napoleon. You deprive your enemy of resources. In today's perverse situation, the Israelis, with our encouragement, are trying to enhance the wealth of their neighbor, and hoping that people will thereby have a stake in middle-class virtues and worry about the children going to school and having a late model car and a nice apartment. That's not how it works. The more money that the Palestinians have, the more war they have. It stands to reason. That's how human beings
You're
are.
really critical then of the Israeli government's position.
I'm critical of the Israeli government's leadership, yes. I'm critical of our government's leadership as well as many other governments. But I see that, as I mentioned before, that there are more and more Israelis who are saying roughly what I'm saying. It's time to go back to deterrence. From 1948 to 1993 was deterrence. Then 1993 to 2000 was appeasement. Appeasement is the policy of giving your enemy something and hoping it'll leave you alone. And since from 2000, 2006 or so, it was unilateral withdrawal in Lebanon and Gaza and almost in the West Bank. And since 2006, it's been no policy, just dealing with the daily fires. And I'm suggesting a policy of deterrence, of trying to wear down your enemy by making life difficult for him. Not bombing him, but making his life difficult is what worked for Israel for 35 years, and we're working it. And we should support it. We should encourage it. Last question. Sir.
Where do you think China and Russia is in this whole?
China and Russia. Well, the Russian government under Putin is essentially trying to make trouble for us. It's not really a coherent policy. It's not the Soviet Union. It doesn't have an ideological framework. It doesn't have grand goals. But in part, it wants to make trouble for us. In part, it wants to maintain its gas presence. It's very concerned about gas. For example, why did Vladimir Putin turn up at the Western Wall with the kippah about 3 years ago? First president in the history of Russia to turn up at the Western Wall with the kippah? Because of gas. They're concerned about the Orthodox Christians of Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere, and their historic tie to the region has been through the Orthodox Christians. They're concerned about their tiny, tiny little facility, can't even call it a base, in Syria, in Tartus. But most of all, I think they just want to get in our way. China is a very different story. The Chinese are a much more serious government that has until now primarily stayed out of politics internationally, buying and selling and expanding its influence, and keeping out of issues. It just doesn't have a presence. Yeah, it votes at the Security Council, but that's about it. I think that's going to change in part because China's getting more and more powerful, has this military that is primarily focused, whose purpose is primarily focused on East Asia, but also has implications for other regions, and specifically, and secondly, the Persian Gulf. As the Chinese economic machine grows and grows, so does dependence on the Persian Gulf. We have been the guardian of the Persian Gulf. We, because we're, at least under Obama, withdrawing from the Middle East, and we, because we now have our own North Dakota and Ohio and Pennsylvania, are less interested in the Persian Gulf, are leaving it for others to guard, and the others presumably very much include the Chinese. So look forward, expect the Chinese to get deeply involved in the Persian Gulf, and perhaps even replace us as those who maintain the security of that vital energy region. Thank you so much. I would like to acknowledge Bonnie and Stephen Schwartz, who have been the sponsors of this evening's talk. Thank you.